Hello, everyone. Maybe we should wait a minute before everybody joins in. Edward, do we see people joining in?
Yeah, we have the first 23 people. Now we're up to 33. So hello, everyone. We're good. We're just gonna give a minute or two for everybody to join us.
Or I can start talking now while people are joining.
Okay, great.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pavla Niklova. I'm the executive director of the Vaclav Havel Library Foundation, and I'm very pleased to welcome you at the opening night of the spring weekend of stage readings, which is a part of the Rehearsal for Truth Festival honoring Vaclav Havel. Of course, we hoped that we could welcome you at Bohemian National Hall in Manhattan where we normally hold our events. That can't happen, of course, but we are happy to welcome you on Zoom. We are happy that people from all across the United States can join us, and also people from other countries. I would like to thank all the panelists and directors and actors for joining us in preparing spring weekend in these changed circumstances. I'd like to start the evening by giving our big thanks to the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs and New York City Council for their support to our programs. It is my great pleasure to welcome Council Member Ben Kallos and thank him for his continuous support and ask him to tell us a few words about where we are in New York City and something from his city government's perspective and what hopes, wishes, and worries you have for the upcoming days. Council member, please. You have to unmute yourself. We don't hear you.
Thank you,
okay.
To Pavla and the entire Bohemian Benevolent and Literary Association, and your president, Joseph Balaz, and just everyone who is working with this. I'm Council Member Ben. I say Kalos. If you asked my grandparents, they would say Kalos, because my family is from Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia, and the entire region that was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And I couldn't be prouder to represent the Cultural Center. The City Council has modest funds where we can promote and support local organizations, and it has been my honor to support this festival and the BBLA and just everything that you do in honor of Vaclav Havel. And just wanted to thank everyone for coming out and thank the talent that you will be hearing from and seeing. And I will just do a quick piece on what's going on with the pandemic since you asked. We are working on a plan for phase 1 to reopen. And then also there is a new normal. And so you are hearing a beautiful rendition of Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes from my daughter in the background. And I couldn't be prouder. This is, I guess, her first official performance, at least by her voice. And so there's a lot of parents who are doing exactly what I'm doing if they have the privilege of working from home. We've been trying to work with cultural organizations just like you to get folks to be able to bring their great programs online. And so we're looking at phase 1 opening in June, and that involves construction in certain essential programs and moving forward on phase 2. If you're interested in the day-by-day counting, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene in the City of New York has a coronavirus page with data where it will show you day by day how many cases we're getting, how many new people are testing positive, sadly, how many people are dying, and how we can move forward. And I'm just hoping we can work together. One of the things we proposed is just trying to figure out ways of getting folks like you open. Is there a way to take this audience, 50 or so people, and sit everyone 6 feet apart in the grand hall, as it were, and have people in a place where they can do so, but do it safely. There's a lovely, lovely restaurant downstairs. One of the things I proposed with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer is to take the parking on the street, get rid of it temporarily, and replace it with outdoor seating where people could enjoy Czech food. And I know so many of us are doing so. And is the restaurant still open for takeout and delivery?
Yes, yes, it has been open. Yeah.
So I will just plug that if you are watching this, it might be a great opportunity to have the most authentic experience by ordering from the restaurant downstairs. So I want to thank you for having me. I'm Councilmember Ben Kalos. You can follow me at benkalos.com or at benkalos on social media, and email me anytime, bkalos@benkalos.com. I'm going to hop to the next series of evening events. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all that you do. We are so lucky to have you here in the city.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind words. Before we start tonight's program, I'd like to invite everybody to join us for 3 stage readings of wonderful European plays that we will be presenting this weekend. Please go to our new festival website, Rehearsal for Truth, where you will find more information about the plays and about amazing casts for each play. We started the festival Rehearsal for Truth to honor Václav Havel by presenting contemporary European plays and theater, and by initiating new partnerships between European and American theater professionals. When we select the program, we always think about what Václav Havel would like, whether the piece is politically and socially engaged enough that if he would appreciate that. We are not limited to any particular genre. We present drama, comedies, as well as dance and physical theater. We love theater. We are determined to continue in this work. We know it must be so hard for all the actors not to be on the stage tonight. And we can't wait to have you all back again. My last request tonight is for Havel Foundation is a part of New York City, and our events for public are normally free. However, with the spring weekend, we have decided to raise funds to buy art supplies for children from public schools in Elmhurst, Queens, which is one of the neighborhoods that was most hit by COVID-19. So every dollar counts. You can contribute when you RSVP for the stage reading or from the main website of the foundation on bhlf.org. I'd like to thank you in advance for your help, and also thanks so much to everybody who has already contributed. Now let me introduce tonight's moderator. Edward Einhorn is a New York-based playwright and theater director. He's also artistic director of the Untitled Theater Company number 621. In 2006, he produced the whole festival of Václav Havel's plays in New York City. And so I believe he's one of the best experts on Havel's plays. And I'd like to thank him very much for preparing this exciting program for tonight. Edward, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you so much. So just to give you an idea of what we're doing tonight, we're going to do a bunch of small scenes from Havel's work, and we have most of the translators here with us. Jan Novak is also a translator that I pre-recorded a interview with because he's in Berlin and it's 1 a.m. for him right now. But I'm going to ask everyone to turn on their mics for a second. We'll just chat with them for a second, and then we're going to start into the program. So first, if I might introduce our translators. So we have Paul Wilson, who is calling in from Ontario. And Paul, of course, has been, when did you start translating Havel's work, Paul?
Well, it was in 1979, when I'd already been expelled from Czechoslovakia, and I translated his essay, The Power of the Powerless. That was the first thing, and then one thing led to another. But I didn't start translating his plays until the late 1980s.
Yeah,
that was quite a shift in focus.
Great. So Paul has done many of the seminal essays of Havel, and memoirs, and also he has translated the Memo, which we will be hearing this evening. Very excited to have you with us, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, even though it doesn't feel like I'm anywhere right now.
That's sort of why it feels with all of us, but we're sort of here. And then Stepan Simek, who's coming in from Portland, Oregon. And Stepan's translation of The Increased Difficulty of Translation was also part of the 2006 Havel Festival, which is what we're going to be concentrating on for a while. Oh, somebody's writing in to mention that Paul is listed as Edward. Yes, there are a few technical glitches that we've been working on, but Paul is Paul, and I am also Edward. And Stepan, you've done a lot of work with Chekhov as well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Want to tell us just a little bit of your history of translating in general?
Well, I have been ever since the late 1990s, because I'm a theater director also, and I'm a professor at the college. I was always interested in introducing all sorts of, European and Czech plays onto the American stages. So I started translating contemporary Czech playwrights in the late 1990s and in 2000. So I did about 5 plays by Petr Zelenka. I have done some other plays by some other Czech playwrights. And I have been invited, I think in 2006, to do one of the translations of a Havel play, The Increased Difficulty of Concentration. So
Not translation.
And that was, I concentrated on it a lot. And then I went on translating some other Czech plays. And then about 4 years ago, I decided that it's time to have like some really very contemporary translations of Chekhov's plays, because I love Chekhov. So I was working with a theater company here in Portland, and we have put together a set of new contemporary American translations of all of the great Chekhov plays.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here. And then also we have 5 actors who have been working with Untitled Theater Company in one way or another, really at least 10 years, each of them, probably more. I'm going to introduce them as they appear on my screen, though that may not be how they appear on your screen. But there's Yvonne Roen, Richard Toth, Craig Anderson, Incrocci, and Peter Brown. They're coming from all over the United States, and Peter is coming in from Taiwan. So good morning, Peter. Good to see you again. The way that this panel is going to work is we're going to do a little bit of a scene, and then we're going to have a discussion with the translator and others about that scene and translation in general. We're going to start off with the memo, and the scene we're going to do is with Peter and Uma, who were the actors who originally did that translation during the Havel Festival. So they are reprising their roles. And I'm just going to hand it over to Paul for a moment and let you introduce the scene before we play it.
So we're doing scene 8, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the memo, as you probably all know, is set in an institution that has just been ordered from on high to adopt an incomprehensible language as their official way of communicating. And as dotted through the play are scenes in the educational center where a P2P expert, Mr. Brown, is explaining and trying to teach P2P to his students and explain to them the principles involved. And part of the humor of this is that there are at least 4 scenes in this language center, and each time there's one fewer student, so that by the time the play is over, there are no more students left. People just pass, leave the class because it's too difficult for them. So that's the setup, and I think scene 8 involves well, you'll see what it involves.
Great, thank you so much, Paul. So I'm going to hand it over to the actors.
And now I will mention, just to get you oriented, some of the most common P2P interjections. For example, our is zukibij in P2P. Our ow is bikur. Oh is haivdi dortob. Wow is bolipak juz. The expression of mild surprise, my, is said as zik, but the slightly more emphatic my, is not zik, as some students erroneously believe, but zigzim. Holy smokes is very lagov ibdi solas. Whoopee, to express excitement, is hadidix ujoba, but whoopee meaning possibly a sexual act, as in making whoopee, is maluz rog. Oy vey is ha tum.
Sir?
Yes.
Can you tell me how to say oopsie daisy in P2P?
Miko.
Thank you.
Psst is katudap. Is venil. The poetic invocation is hulugip. Is usually translated as lemur, though I would prefer to use the expression mrib uputer. Our very important word, hooray, is vermigiko jefferdabux alteb di savarab goz terexis. And now, a brief test of your memory. Holy smokes. Uma, Miss Kalosh.
Variagath ib de solas.
Oive, Miss Kalosh.
Hatum.
Psst, Miss Kalosh.
Katuda.
Whoopee.
To signify excitement?
No, as in making whoopee. Miss Kalosh.
Maluz rog.
Maluz.
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 Listen carefully. Maluz.
Maluz.
Your pronunciation is going to the dogs, Miss Kalosh. How do you say my?
Zik.
And my?
Zik, zik.
Zigzim.
I'm sorry, I forgot. Zik, zim.
Uma. How about, oh my God?
Well, I'm sorry, we haven't gotten that far yet.
That's no excuse. The fact is, you don't know. Hooray!
Fernico, Jefford, Dopux, Altip, D, Saber, Gopterexes.
Wrong again. Gozterexes.
I meant Gozterexes.
Such an important little word. No, Miss Kalosh, that's not the way to get ahead here. I've invested so much hope in you, and you turn around and what? Well, you've disappointed me. Yes, indeed, you've disappointed me. No, we certainly can't. What? Well, go on this way. No, indeed, we certainly can't, because before you know it, you turn this place into a what? Well, come on, answer.
I don't know.
Go on, try.
A nursery school?
No.
A kindergarten?
No.
A crazy house?
That's more like it. A crazy house. No, Miss Kalosh. Under these circumstances, you cannot continue this course. It'll only slow things down and hold the others back. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the class. Let us continue. Hello is said as Trevant. You see, as Kabilis Ubahaj Kupit. Look, as Hovro Gaborte. Eek is rendered as, well.
Okay, we're coming back now.
That was fantastic. That was really fantastic. Start my, hold on. Start my video. Okay. There we go. Hey, I have my name back.
Yes.
I should say, if you want me to just make a little comment about that scene, to go back in history a bit. You remember that I tried this translation out with your troupe, and they read early drafts of it, and it was very exciting. And when it came to cast the festival, and I guess it was 2006, you were having I don't know exactly why, but you decided to cast Uma, who is in the original play a man, as a woman, and that changed the whole dynamic of the lesson. And so I managed to tweak the translation a little bit to take that into account. And as you can see in the excellent performance tonight, it turns into a kind of a flirt session that goes wrong at the end. That's a little bit of the backstory of that scene.
Yeah, and it was very fun to play with as a director as well.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the reasons I want to do it and knowing that Peter and Mua, yeah.
The other thing that Peter brought out tonight that I hadn't seen before is there's an element of utter lunacy about this project, and you can see Peter gradually going mad during the scene, and he ends up as quite crazy. So it's excellent. It was excellent.
That's perfect. So we were talking about the nonsense language, Petitapi, a little bit this afternoon, the other afternoon, and that you just transcribed literally from what Havel had written.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, there was no translation involved at all, and thank God, because I don't know, I would have to make up a whole new language, and it's so nonsensical and so impenetrable. It doesn't sound like a Slavic language. It doesn't sound like a Germanic language. It doesn't sound like a Romance language. It's a work of genius in itself, but it's totally impenetrable. That's just the way it's supposed to be.
But it seems to me that the challenge are all those phrases like whoopee or my or oy vey or whatever you chose, and finding the correlation right.
The because the words that I mean, I was translating those into English, and I realized to my horror as I was listening to it now that some of those phrases are slightly dated now. I mean, people don't say making whoopee anymore. It's really outdated. And which is an argument that Havel came to me with when he suggested that I translate this play, was that plays need updating even more than novels or essays, because the language has to be somehow contemporary. And I can see in that particular scene that there's a little bit of a kind of anachronism in it. At least it feels that way to me right now.
Though I will also say that the sort of stodgy professor character feels like he comes from a different era as a result, which it sort of works for him. That he would use terms like making whoopee. It is such
right.
a oddball flirtation as well, that I think it works well for that particular character.
Right, it is. Anyway, Havel was delighted with the idea because he's not in any ways as an author. He's not kind of wedded to his own words the way some other authors are that I could name. And so he was he likes that kind of experimentation and playing around. I mean, I remember once there was a theater company in Toronto that took his 3 one-act plays, The Audience, Vernissage, and Protest, and they blended it into one play that ran the whole evening. And when I mentioned this to Havel, he was absolutely thrilled with the idea. So he was really open to experimentation.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is the use of the actors' names. So the original referred to the actors in the original production in Prague.
That's correct.
And then we decided to sort of reflect that rather than just use their names.
Right.
Use the actor name. Yeah.
Vera Blackwell's translation, which she made in the mid '60s, did the same thing. Not as completely as Havel did, but she used some of the actors' names as well. So we just thought that this was a kind of a tribute to the origins of the play, and a gesture towards Havel's own creative method, because he worked very closely with the actors. He was not only a playwright but a dramaturge as well. And so he was very deeply involved, not just in the writing of the play, but also in the production of it.
Yeah. So tonight everyone got to see Brown played by Brown and Uma played by Uma.
Uma, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts in terms of translating a play and the difficulties, and translating the essays and the difficulties with that?
Well, recently I have had a chance to revisit the first translation of Havel that I made, which was The Power of the Powerless, and it's a very powerful essay. And what I realized, having translated his essays and his plays, was that there's a very deep disconnect between the kind of worldview that you get from his plays and the worldview that you get from his essays. Havel saw most of his plays, if not all of his plays, as essentially tragedies, and there's no way in the context in which they were written, there was no way that there could be a happy ending. There was no way that there could be that the hero could ever triumph, because the system was just too overwhelming, and the intellectual convolutions that the hero goes through trying to adapt to the system means that he essentially condemns himself to failure. Whereas the essays, and especially The Power of the Powerless, are imbued with the great hope that by acting truthfully or living in truth, that you can actually change things, and the ending will not be as inevitable as it seems when you're in the middle of those circumstances. That system was a system that claimed to be last forever, and there was no way out. And suddenly Havel found a way out, and the way out was what he called living in truth. And this is something that the character of his plays never seemed to quite be able to pull off.
It seems to me often that the characters are especially the stand-ins for him, sort of express his fears about his own possible moral failings. And they have these
That's right.
long, elaborate monologues at the end often that are these sort of monologues of capitulation to the system and rationalization about why what they're doing is morally correct when it clearly is not.
Right. One more note that I could mention, or one more observation that I could mention about his plays and about Havel's notion of truth in general. Havel believed, and you can see it in his plays, that the truth is not an absolute, but truth depends on who is speaking, the context in which the statement is made, and the person to whom the statement is addressed. So that a play like, for example, The Beggar's Opera, everybody in the play lies to each other, and yet when they're lying, they're saying they're expressing something that is at the same time true. And this is why Havel adopted as his slogan when he became president, the slogan, "Truth and love will triumph over lies and hatred." And he was ridiculed for that because it sounded so Pollyannish. But what he meant was that truth is truth, and love represents for him the willingness of the person making the statement to stand behind what he or she has said, and the person who and that is what makes a truth germane. The fact that it's uttered, but that it is also backed up by a person who accepts responsibility for what he said.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I thank the actors as well. It was just a tremendous. I didn't think it could work, but it did.
Yeah, they did a great job. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
So I'm going to introduce the next scene, which is from Jan Novak's Office Party. We don't have Jan to introduce that for us here. But maybe for the actors who are going to be in it want to turn on their video and such, I'll start the introduction. So Office Party is also translated as Garden Party. This was Jan Novak's translation, which was in the also premiered at the Havel Festival. This version makes it a little bit more corporate. The scene you're about to see is a scene with two petty bureaucrats and a supervisor of sorts who comes in and with all the bluster that supervisor brings. And unseen is a character that you'll see appear in the next scene, which is going to be me. But he is sort of observing all the shenanigans in this world, and he eventually uses his observations to master the world. So it was originally very much about government bureaucracy. And in Jan's translation, it's a little bit also about corporate bureaucracy, and you can feel the connection between the two. So we're going to have two short scenes, and then I will bring on the interview with Jan that I recorded earlier today. So this is the first scene, and I'll be back to introduce the second.
So, what's new by this door? You's having fun? The conversation ain't dying in here, is it? The office party is a party.
It is not dying. Thank you.
It isn't dying at all.
That's good. And anywho, it's good you showed up tonight to help out. Now go ahead and sit down. Drop a load off of your feet. Relax. Take something off even. Kick off your shoes. You're with yours here, damn it. Well, so, how'd you like my opening remarks, huh? Pretty slick, huh? Well, you know, I talk like a regular guy, so I always push it off the dead spot. I never chose on purpose to talk like a man in the street. It just happened that way. I hate bullshit and I hate BS. But that ain't surprising, because I'm just your regular Joe, your meat and potatoes and milkman. To make a long story short, I'm one of yous. Go ahead and eat. Don't let me stop you. If you got something to eat, we ain't gonna stand on no goddamn protocol. Nothing that's human is foreign to me. Well, anyway, the main thing is I managed to create a friendly, relaxed atmosphere here. You know, that's just me. Wherever I go, big fun follows. Well, anyway, I'm sure the downsizing office is a pretty damn important place with a capital agenda. Even if used people fall into some unproductive paper pushing now and again. But the headquarters has noticed it. They're addressing it at the top of the food chain, and that's why we're having an office party. And don't worry. This is really just about relaxing and getting to know each other and developing into a team. Teamwork is the capital idea here, among other things. Because yous don't even act like regular folks. And I mean regular for real. So, yous know why 6 was afraid of 7. Because 7, 8, 9. Okay. Ain't we all of us sort of coming from the same mother? Well, anyway, I gotta run. I gotta go check to see if the conversations ain't dying around the pavilion. So, for right now, you gotta get down without me.
So how is the family? How are the kids? Causing trouble? Causing trouble!
Not really. I do not have any kids. I do not!
How come? How come? Are you not married?
I am not. I am not! And you?
I am not either! I am not either.
And how are the kids? And how are the kids?
You know, kids always causing trouble. Causing trouble!
Edward, you're muted. You're muted, Edward.
Thank you so much. So that was scene 1. We're going to move on to scene 2, which is towards the end of the play. And at this point, Hugh is sort of infiltrated the company, and he has managed to force the company to destroy itself in a certain way, as you'll see. So he's used the downsizing department to downsize the whole of the place, and realized that it's sort of the person with the most bluster who has the most power in these situations. So we're going to see that final scene. Another important thing to know for this scene is that the 2 bureaucrats that you saw before, a little bit of a romance bloomed up between them, but it's a doomed romance, and executive number 2, aka Uma, has realized that fact. So let's move into scene 2.
Madam Downsizing Executive. You're muted, Uma.
Sorry.
We'll start again. Madam Downsizing Executive,
Yes?
May I ask you a question?
Oh, certainly.
Is this total downsizing going to take long?
Why do you ask?
Well, you don't feel like hopping into bed?
How do you mean?
Oh, I don't mean it in a bad way.
Well, it cannot take too long. The organizational structure of the speaker services really lends itself to downsizing. We can apply Schedule C here. I am working from the ground up, implementing A, and a colleague of mine is working from the top down, implementing B, which is to say performing the normal downsizing to zero mass. So we are moving towards one another.
Oh, I get it. So you'll meet in the middle, I suppose.
No. According to our downsizing projections, we are to meet on the 3rd floor, but it is possible that my colleague will get there ahead of me. He is an incredibly hard worker.
Ah, some jerk, huh?
Don't talk about him that way, at least not in front of me.
I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking.
Jesus Christ, what is the big deal? Or do you not think that I am a woman, or what?
But I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, sorry.
So, that colleague of yours can show up here at any moment.
Yes, we must hurry up. Do you have the list of downsizing forms?
Yes.
And the summary of the delimitational norms?
That I don't have.
Is that jacket a medium?
Yeah.
But the list of downsizing forms is invalid without the summary of the delimitational norms.
But isn't the list of downsizing forms enough if it's based on the summary of the delimitational norms?
That would invalidate the entire downsizing.
Isn't that a bit of a formal norm?
On the contrary, it is a perfectly normal form. What size is that shirt?
18.
The edge is smudged.
You know, I don't want to argue, but where...
By the breast pocket?
No, I don't want to argue, but where...
This has been spelled out in the Manual of Downsizing Regulations.
I don't want to argue, but where was this manual first proposed?
At this year's downsizing regionals.
And where was it adopted?
At last year's downsizing regionals.
And where was it confirmed?
At the downsizing regionals 2 years ago, where you yourself gave the opening remarks, memorably so. Oh, you had used the words of a song, don't you remember? Don't want to be your tiger, don't want to be a square.
I just want to be your teddy bear.
Oh, yeah. Or sex and drugs and rock and roll.
That's all my body needs.
Hey, Mr. Bartender, 1 bourbon, 1 scotch.
And 1 bill.
Oh my God.
Come on. Madam Downsizing Executive, there's more than 1 flower blooming under the sun. You're a woman, take it like a man.
So, you are not familiar with the Manual of Downsizing Regulations?
I wanted to be your teddy bear. So I wasn't paying any attention to any of the downsizing regulations. You see, I had my head in the sand.
That is not my problem. Maybe if this were not a total downsizing, I could possibly close 1 eye.
What sort of downsizing is this anyway?
A total downsizing to zero mass.
So the headquarters are going to transfer us to another entity?
The pipe fitters, probably.
How are they going to integrate us with them?
They may set up 9-man teams consisting of 1 pipe fitter and 8 speaker services personnel.
Will these teams fit pipes or give speeches?
Fit pipes, of course. Waist?
Oh, 38.
All right. So that is pretty much all for Schedule A. I'm going up a floor now. I will get the basket on my way down. My colleague should be here presently to implement Schedule B. Oh my God. I am not a woman. I am a piece of wood.
Oh. What a day. No. Come on, Jerry, you better stay up.
Hello there, boss.
What? Oh, yes, that's me, so to speak.
I woke you up.
Not at all. Thank you.
Go ahead, sit down, won't you? We're all human, aren't we? So, how's your liver doing?
Thank you. You mean the kidneys?
Who the hell cares, right? It's just you and me here, isn't it?
Yes, of course.
Well, dog, so how are we doing? What are we up to?
Well, as we know, we try to have a life here. We give speeches, dog.
And that's how it should be. Let's live it up. Okay. So that was the office party. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move us over to the interview that I did with Jan just this afternoon. Hi, Jan. So we are recording today in the afternoon, my time, but the evening, Jan's time.
My ear, it was the way one of the landlords of mine sounded. A real loquacious guy and stuff. And when I read Slug in Czech, it was intuitive. A lot of it is intuitive. I just started hearing this guy's diction, so I used it.
Right. And things like the very, American, like the joke, why did 6-8 seed 7, or the like turns of phrases that are very American. Do they have an equally Czech specificity?
They don't. They're kind of this is my freest translation of anything. It's almost bordering at times on adaptation, but it was sanctified by Vaclav. I asked him beforehand if that's possible, if he would be okay with me doing this, because I read the play kind of late. I read it. It was probably the last play of Havel's that I'd read, and it's one of his best pieces, which I don't know why I had an aversion to it. By that time, I'd already translated his one acts and stuff, and I read most of his writing, and all of a sudden I still hadn't read Zahradní slavnost. So eventually I got around to it, and I discovered that it exactly describes my 10 years at the phone company in Chicago.
Sure.
Where it was all about, who gets the corner office, who gets what office furniture. The job of the running telephones was completely incidental to this office life, which he wonderfully encapsulated in this play. And it's still, and it's wonderfully universal. It's how office people all over the world function. They get their job done in 2, 3, 4 hours, and then the rest of the time they play these office games about power and and information, and nobody really knows why everybody can be replaced. Somebody can step in their shoes fairly quickly, So it's all about hoarding information and posturing in front of other people and stuff like this in meetings. And it's all there. So, but the play wasn't being played in the States, and I was wondering why. Yeah. And I thought maybe it's the framework of it, which is Marxist, outdated Marxist jargon. and these proverbs. So I figured, what if I try to get rid of it, try to update it into kind of a more contemporary kind of capitalist newspeak, and get rid of the proverbs as well, because and try to replace them with something more. There's a lot of fun destroying these proverbs, you know, and with these surreal juxtapositions of two proverbs, and the proverbs were also dated because that's how the communist leaders were trying to speak the language of the masses. They thought was this kind of a fake, folksy idiom that they were using. Very solid target, but it just didn't seem to me, when I tried to think about how I do it with American proverbs, it didn't seem to be working. So I decided to just try to replace them with songs and phrases from sports that you hear from sports announcers, you know, kind of a TV wisdom, which is much closer to the American common man these days. Right. And so I approached Vaclav. I told him my idea, and he said, "Okay, if you think it might, you know, if you want to do this, go ahead. You know, if you think it might improve the play." Or he wrote somewhere that play is only a kind of a set of ingredients, which it's a okay set of ingredients, and which has to be cooked properly by concrete place and time. So I figured I will cook this set of ingredients, the Hradní Slavnost, the office party, in the American way, in the Chicago way, as best I can. And he's okay, and this is the result.
Perfect. In part two, you particularly suggested part two, and I think was it the sort of rhythm of the way that part two was written that was interesting to you in terms of talking about the translation?
Well, it's definitely, you know, I think where I didn't really read Hradní Slavnost properly, right, when I became interested in Vaclav Havel, even though I knew that this is his big step into the theater world, was the metaphor of chess.
Yes.
Guy playing chess with himself, which I thought was a kind of a tired metaphor. You know, I wasn't completely swept away by it. I don't think that part seemed to me to be the worst part. And then eventually when the kind of a corporate situation gets going, I found it much more captivating. And the rhythms are perfect. You know, even the intricate long speeches, which are spoken by two characters at the same time, which pose a challenge for any kind of a theatrical production, are really wonderfully phrased and wonderfully timed and wonderfully rhythmical. So I was trying to capture that in a different, you know, English is obviously a very different rhythm from Czech. So
sure. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of what Havel writes is about rhythm as much as anything else, I find.
Any good writing is, I think.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite writing is. So yeah, I think that's definitely true. And there's also the sort of convoluted speech that the executive uses of the bureaucracy speech, which is, you know, he plays around in various ways in some of his early plays, but
well, Hughes grows into the role. I think that Hugh grows into the role. I think he goes there kind of, you know, quite innocent. I don't think he goes there as a power hungry.
No.
He just dealing with these people starts realizing that he can just by playing it close to the vest, he can grab all this power. So he just goes for it, you know, as an opportunist. I don't think he's a eager creation. It's a guy into whose lap all this opportunity falls, and he just grabs it.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me that he starts realizing, like he's sort of analyzing as he goes, and he's confronted by all these sort of nonsensical rules, and he realizes that even the people who are presenting those rules and creating this tangle of bureaucracy don't really understand the rules themselves. It's all about power, and so it's the person who, in the end, he seems to take on this persona of the person who portrays the most confidence has the most power, no matter what's going on.
Which is completely reflective of the political situation of the time when he wrote it, in the early 60s, you know, when the ideology, communist ideology, which had once motivated people to give up their lives, not only 10 years earlier, there were fanatics.
Yeah.
Completely empty of content after 10 years of communist rule. And nobody really believed it, but they didn't know how to get rid of it. And it was just that they used it in this way.
Well, you know, there's certainly having a know-nothing who betrays a lot of confidence and takes power is not unknown for today's politics either.
That's why it's universal.
Yeah. Great. Do you have any other thoughts about the play or the translation you want to share?
It's kind of interesting that, as absurd as everything, all the going-ons, you know, all the scenes in the play are, it ends with a serious speech.
Mm-hmm.
Where Havel kind of, Hugh becomes, in my opinion, is kind of a alter ego, and he kind of explains how, even though everything seems to be relative, there might still be something at the core of identity in the end after all.
Right.
And I thought, when I was translating the play, that because it's antithetical to most of the piece, that it might do without it. So after I'd done all the work, presented Havel with it, he said, I can't really judge it, my English is not good enough. I said, what about this speech at the end? It doesn't really, it stops the show at the end, you know, you could very well do without it. And he said, no, it's really important, you have to leave it in there. So of course, I left it there. But I must say that when you invited me to that festival of Havel's, all the Havel's plays, and when you guys did Office Party as a part of it, Havel saw it.
Yes.
And after I flew in from Chicago, and I was talking to him for the first time after I got into town, he says, you know, you were right, it works. The transfer of Office Party. So that put me on cloud 9.
That's great. Great. So I'm going to move to the increased difficulty of concentration now, and trying to bring back. Here we go. So Stepan, as I bring back the actors, if you want to introduce the scene that we are going to do.
Okay. So what you will be seeing is the last scene from the increased difficulty of concentration. Just quickly about the play, if I were to give it a subtitle, I would probably call it something like a critique of scientific materialism by the means of metaphysical door-slamming sex farce. In the last scene, you will see Dr. Havel, played by Richard, and Havel is some sort of a social scientist who works in some sort of a social science institute, and who constantly and endlessly throughout the play holds forth about the nature of humanity. He is married, but he also sort of frantically juggles a pretty complex web of intimate relationships. His various lovers, they sort of pop in and out throughout the play, and he is desperately trying to manage them. So he is in that sort, he is the sort of classic Czech intellectual womanizer, maybe a little bit like Havel. He has been randomly selected as a subject in a study of human individuality from the scientific materialistic point of view. The study is conducted by Dr. Elizabeth Balthazar, played by Yvonne, who is a stuck-up fanatical adherent to rational thought. And the study also makes use of a machine, a sort of absurd computer-like contraption, which is called Pazook. And Pazook is asking its subject series of random questions, and he is supposed to evaluate the answers and to compile analysis of the individual, and again from the scientific materialistic point of view. Pazook, the machine, is run and maintained by a crew of kind of inept mechanics. The machine constantly malfunctions. It is extremely sensitive to all kinds of environmental and other factors. It overheats, it freezes, it mixes things up, and so on and so on. It's like Zoom. So in the final scene, just after Pazook, the machine has run completely amok. Dr. Havel has finally had enough of the absurd questioning and the whole experimentation, and he confronts Dr. Balthazar about her supposed research. And this is what the scene is. So whenever you guys are ready, I think you can start.
Are we ready?
Yep.
Quiet in the room, please.
Oh, it's about time.
Which is your favorite tunnel? Do you like musical instruments? How many times a year do you air the town square? Where did you bury the dog? Why didn't you pass it on? When did you lose your right? What is the very essence of things? How are things at home today? Do you pee in public or only occasionally?
What the hell is this all about?
Turn it off. Probably a short, don't you think?
I doubt it. Looks more like a stray electric impulse.
Damn it. Those are what we call wayward thoughts. Hallucinations, really. When that happens, he doesn't know what's going on. I had the feeling from the beginning that he wasn't himself today. Will you try to find that lost impulse?
I'd like to, but I'm not authorized. I don't want to get into trouble, but I'll give it to a guy I know. He's got a little workshop and he'll do it for a song.
I'm sorry that we bothered you unnecessarily today. Could we drop in after the weekend once again? Dr. Havel? Can we drop in next week again?
What?
I asked if we could call on you once more when Pazook is well again.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I think it'd be a waste of time.
Why? It certainly wouldn't be a waste for us.
It would too, I'm afraid.
I'm not following you.
Look, I don't doubt that you mean well, and I do respect your enthusiasm for the work you're doing. But as I am actively engaged in the social sciences myself, no matter how hard I try, I simply cannot take this whole enterprise of yours very seriously. I said I simply cannot take the whole thing seriously.
What do you mean? Why not?
Well, judging by what I've seen so far and by what you told me about your work, I'm absolutely convinced that from the perspective of science, of scientific inquiry, your whole project is nothing more than an unfortunate mistake. And you must understand that my scientific conscience simply doesn't allow me to collaborate on an endeavor which I'm completely sure is at its very core utterly flawed.
You said something very different before.
It was just a little misunderstanding.
Mention the fact that you'd have to prove a statement like that.
If that's what you want, nothing could be easier. I could simply point out the clearly obvious fact that that which from one point of view appears to be regular and predictable may from another point of view appear completely random, and vice versa. Because regularity and randomness do not constitute any absolute categories of objectively existing and mutually indivisible realms of reality, but rather their scope merely depends on the particular point of view that we choose. There's nothing to be done, but from the point of view of science, everything is always in one way or another regular, whereas science itself is nothing more and nothing less than the gradual uncovering of such regularities. What we call random is merely that which exists, either outside the area of regularity which we examine at a particular time, or that which we simply do not know how to explain in terms of regularity. This, of course, means that your attempt to isolate that which is random and to use it to model human individuality has nothing to do with science whatsoever, because the individual, as an objective totality, basically possesses an infinite number of dimensions. Science can never even approach such outer limits. I'm afraid that the key to the real knowledge of the individual I does not lie within the more or less well understood complexity of an individual as an object of scientific inquiry, but only, and I repeat, only within his complexity as an object of human togetherness. Values such as love, friendship, compassion, empathy, as well as the incomparable and unique mutual human understanding and even mutual conflict, are the only tools that such human contact has at its disposal. Everything else may help us to more or less explain an individual, but never to understand him. And consequently, never to gain even a rudimentary knowledge of him. Therefore, the basic key to the individual does not lie in his brain, but rather in his heart. Why are you crying? I didn't mean to hurt you. It was just my opinion. I had no idea that you would take it personally. Forget everything I said. Oh, there.
It's my whole life.
I'm sure I was wrong. I'm sure I didn't understand your explanation correctly.
It's all I have in this world.
I'm really, really, really sorry.
You humiliated me horribly. How mean and malicious you are, all of you. You don't understand anything at all.
Please calm down, please.
Oh, I hate you for what you've done to me.
Come on, please, don't cry. I've been cruel, cynical. I'm ashamed of myself. Mm. 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 Oh. Mm.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Till tomorrow.
Can I call you tomorrow?
Yes, of course.
You will have time for me, won't you?
Sure.
Say something tender to me before you leave.
Honey,
I don't like that.
bunny,
That's a little better.
honey bunny.
My name's Betty.
Bye then.
Bye, Eddie.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to bring back Stepan, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the scene.
For some reason, it is telling me that I cannot start up my video. But can you hear me?
Oh, I'm looking for you so I can help you with that. Huh?
To start my video. Ah!
Aha! Great.
That was wonderful, guys. This was lots of fun. This was amazing. Was laughing out loud.
So just wanted to ask you a few thoughts about this. So we were talking a little during rehearsal about that long speech and how difficult that was to translate. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that process of doing that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it here. Actually, I have the Czech edition of it, and I'm looking at this block of words. I remember when I was doing the translation, and whenever I have encountered those, blocks of words, I felt like Sisyphus, of course. And it is difficult to, even as you read it in Czech, right, to actually find the meaning behind it. And this is something that happens so often in Havel's plays, that as you are looking at those long speeches, and he's got them quite often, at first, when you read them a couple of times, you just sort of feel it's nonsense. He's just talking. But as you dig deeper and deeper into them in all of Havel's plays, you sort of figure out that there is a very clear logic that is governing this kind of verbiage and this seeming nonsense. So what I had to do, of course, is that I had to really do a very deep, close reading and analysis of all of those speeches in Czech. And then bit by bit, sort of experimenting with it, trying to find sort of the language for it as such. I find it fascinating in all the translations of Havel's, and many people have already talked about it, to sort of find some kind of an idiom that is an American idiom, yet at the same time reflects that kind of, Czech and idiom that is critiquing really the Marxist, the Marxist language. And because I work at the university, because I'm an academic, I realized that I'm hearing this language all over the time, all over the place, all the time, in all my faculty meetings and group meetings and all of that sort of stuff. This is how people talk. So I have taken a great inspiration from that kind of an academic mumbo jumbo that in the end is sort of very similar to the Marxist, materialist, Leninist mumbo jumbo that Havel is critiquing here, right? So yeah, it was fun. It was difficult. The sentences are absurdly long. And there always exists, I notice it quite often when I'm working with Chekhov, right? His sentences are also very long. And I have noticed that all too often when one does those translations into English, whatever, of Russian, Czech plays, and what have you, that one tends to cut the sentences and make them a little bit shorter, right? You sort of you dismantle the sentences, you break it into smaller units of action. But what happens then is, of course, that you sort of slow through that. You slow that waterfall of words that is falling over our heads. So I had to figure out a lot of things about punctuation, for example, and so on and so on. But you know, it was. I know we shouldn't be using the word "it was fun" too much, but it was fun, right? And I have then, of course, also I have gotten great help from my actors that I have been workshopping this translation with.
Yeah. So do you think the actors changed the translation somewhat after hearing them?
Yeah, they always do. I mean, this is what I think is very important, especially if you are translating plays, that you allow the actors, who are ultimately the people who will be speaking this on stage, to make adjustments, to maybe look for phrases, intonations, verbiage that is helping them to express really the action behind the words. I think whenever I am looking at translating plays, I think it's very different from translating prose, because what you're really doing is that you're working as a director and as an actor first.
Yeah.
You need to find the action. What is it that the character wants to accomplish? And then attach to that action the best possible words that are going to communicate that desire. And the actors can be very helpful with this.
Perfect. Any other thoughts you want to share about translating Havel or this play in general?
Well, you know, I think I was really attracted to this play because it is, I think, of all the Havel plays, sort of the most action-driven one. There's lots of action. And people already talked about that, how Havel was a man of the theater. He understood the rhythm of the theater, the idea of doing in the theater. So I really enjoyed looking at it from that point of view. I produced this play with undergraduate students here in Portland, Oregon, and I do have to tell you that you know, we had audiences of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old college kids. And they were literally falling out of their seats in stitches, laughing. So the play is funny. It does have this kind of a farcical drive that is very attractive. And at the same time, it is also really a critique of the society at that time.
Yeah, it has a really fun, I mean, it's hard to tell the structure from this excerpt, but it moves in and out through time and in and out through these various crazy affairs that the professor is having. So it has the structure of a farce going on while simultaneously tackling these philosophical ideas. And you know, I think Ionesco referred to his pieces as tragic farce, and I know Havel was very influenced by that. So yeah, I think that's one of the really fun things about this piece.
Yeah.
Terrific. So glad. So I'm gonna move quickly to the final piece, and then we're gonna do a Q&A with everyone. So you can answer some questions from the audience. The final piece is Ella, Hela, and the Hitch. It's actually something I translated with the help of Katerina Liu. Unlike the other translators, I am not fluent in Czech, so I was working with a Czech tutor. But this was Havel's earliest piece that he did on his own. It's just a short one act that was part of an evening, sort of a cabaret evening. And he was sort of commenting or joking about these older Czech ladies who grew up in these Germanic schools with Germanic attitudes, and how they are functioning in modern Czech society. But you can already tell that he's playing with language, and he's playing with some of those ideas of UNESCO with language exploding. And so it was very fun for me to translate because it gets more and more nonsensical as it goes along. Just to keep your ear out, there's a point where the one line that says that they're caddies and they're granddaddies. And that was the last time I bothered to actually translate what was originally written. And I went for the sound rather than the meaning at that point. So you might be able to tell that switch as you watch the scene. Okay, here's our last scene, Ella Hill and the Hitch, and then we'll do our Q&A.
Ella, look, a car stopped.
Go to him.
What, me? You go.
Should I spit in his face?
Hold off on that for now, until we see how he looks.
Well, what do you think? How does he look?
Hard to say. Say something to him.
You, fellow there, mind your manners. Well, what do you actually think about us? Well?
Good. Just continue.
What do you think we are? Floozies?
Some kind of common riffraff?
You can't just come on to us. You should be ashamed.
Good day, ladies. I'm afraid there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. I did not actually stop for you, but just sort of to, I would say, by accident. You see, to be exact, out of necessity. You know how it just suddenly comes on.
So you didn't stop for us. Ha! Well, we see. You see what you are like. Oh, Hela dear, we are alone in the world.
We have made so many sacrifices in our life.
If you allow me, ladies, I would like to mention, if I might, that I couldn't very well stop for you since you didn't put out your thumb after all.
What?
Since you didn't put out your thumb.
What?
I only wanted to let you know that you didn't put out your thumb.
Excuse me. How dare you?
Us. Put out our thumbs. That's the limit.
Put out our thumbs. Us! A trick like that.
Are we some kind of floozies?
Some kind of common riffraff.
And if you want to know something, we never in our life have put our thumbs out to anybody. Never in our life, sir, never.
And we also will not put out our thumbs, sir. Never in our life. Never.
Well, then, it might also be expected, in all likelihood, never in your life will anyone stop.
Sir, we have our ethical principles.
Our human dignity.
Our good upbringing.
Our position in society.
Our good habits and practices.
Our family traditions.
Our heirlooms, memories, and idealism.
Our honor, name, and spotless reputation.
Our nieces, ancestors, and relatives.
Our donuts on the 20th of June.
And porcelain deer.
Our coziness and cleanliness.
Our laces, flags, and melodies.
Our ponderings, quills, and almanacs.
Our canneries, uncles, and dream books.
Our dressers and headboards.
Our bedspreads and breviaries.
Our soft cover stories.
Our slippers.
Our sagas.
Our caddies and our granddaddies.
Our diaries, dusters, and dumplings.
Our smocks, our eels, our boxes of pills.
Our hats with veils, apron string tails, and all our travails.
Our potted plants, cabbage cooked, and fished filleted.
Our miniatures, models, and magpies.
our perseverance, purses and purchases,
our shangarisms, shantyisms, and sharpisms,
our phlegmology, castology, and zootopmology,
our patterns, candory, and martyrdom,
our sobriety, gyrodence, and mortness,
our canapacy, candaments, and combring.
Look, Ella.
Look, Hela.
He left.
He left.
Thank you so much. I'm going to bring back everyone now, and we'll take a few questions. So if you can rejoin us, those who are able to start up the video, I'll try to help out the process. Great. All right. So feel free to write down some questions as we go, and we'll get to a few of them what we have time for. Let's start maybe with this this question from Yitka. What were the challenges of translating from your so this is really for you, Stepan. What's the challenges of translating from your mother tongue to a second language, and how did you ensure that the nuances in Havel's text, which a native speaker instinctively perceives, were perceived in your audience?
Well, yeah. Of course, I'm always, whenever I'm translating from Czech into English or from Russian into English, I'm always really working with the actors and with editors. I am, you know, I let people correct my English when English might be bad, right? That is very helpful, and I always have people pick out little inconsistencies, little Czechysms, Simecisms, and however one can call it. You know, how do you keep the nuance of the Czech in English? I mean, this is a question that applies to all translators, right? And this is a big question about sort of translating in general. What you are doing really is that you are sort of weighing the idea of a little bit of an otherness in that language with the need of the language being entirely understandable and entirely sort of speakable in English, right? And I have this theory of mine that when you are translating plays and when you are looking at play, when you are watching plays, listening to plays that are translated from another language into English, that there should be maybe a little bit of a sense of otherness in it. You find that there are certain phrases that maybe you have never heard before, and they make sense, but they are not entirely English. I'm always reminded of that Czech saying, which translates into English. You know, the English phrase is, don't count your chickens before they hatch. The Czech saying is, don't praise the day before the evening comes, right? We don't say it in English. However, we understand it exactly what it is. And it is a direct translation of a Czech phrase. And in that, I think what it does is that it maybe enriches a little bit the target language with a new figure of speech. It is a little bit sort of different. I sort of perk up a little bit when I hear it because I have never heard a phrase like that. Yet at the same time, it makes sense. So I am always in my translations for plays, I'm sort of playing with that balance, right? So I don't know whether that answers the question or not.
Yeah, I think it does. Great. I'm going to address this one to you, Paul. Also Stepan eventually, but how do you approach humor in translation? I love that Czech humor is so different from American humor. Oh, I think we need to unmute you. Okay.
I'm unmutable. How do you approach humor? In terms of Havel's humor, I think you have to kind of trust that the humor is embedded in the action and in the play itself, and not so much in the language. I mean, you can try for funny lines and you can try to establish. Are you getting me? Am I coming through?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. What's very, very often what gets laughs from an audience is not exactly what you intended to get laughs. In other words, the humor is kind of in this sort of odd combination that he has. I just, for example, I mean the excerpts that we saw tonight, with the exception of the last one, all have something in common, and that is that there's a guy trying to seduce a woman using bureaucratic language, using philosophical language, using linguistic, jiggery pokery, and what's happening in those scenes is on the surface, someone speaking to somebody else, but there's always an undercurrent of sort of sexual tension, and that's I mean there's a lot of humor in that. In the memo, there's a speech towards the end when Gross gives this very emotional speech to the character's name I forget now, but the good secretary,
Alice.
Alice, right? And he praises her just as he's ready to ditch her, right? And she ends up saying, "Oh, no one has ever said such nice things about me ever before," and he's just shafted her, right? And there's an element of kind of black humor in that, and it's as I see it tonight, that's in all of his plays. The dynamic between men and women is a very linguistic thing. It's conveyed in language as much as it is in gesture, and so that's something that's kind of beyond the control of the translator. That's in the hands of the actor and the director, the actors and the director.
Yeah, I believe that I would entirely agree with the idea that it is in the action, right? And the act of speaking, the act of using words, and many words, is kind of quite often in those plays a desperate act. And I think that this is at the very, very sort of essence of a farce. And of humor, is that somebody is trying really, really, really hard to achieve something, and they just can't get it. It always reminds me, right, what they do with, what Havel does with language is what, a farce does with a banana peel. What he does with language is, those people, they are just talking desperately, like a little puppy that is running over a polished floor and tries to stop, right? And then just go, and that's funny, right? So I think that we do have to trust Havel's understanding of action. And go with that, and also I think we always need to, and we all have a little bit of a sort of this European sense that we know more than you Americans do, and you will never understand our humor and stuff like that. I don't think it's true. I think that one needs to continue trusting the audience and not talk down to the audience and patronize them.
One thing that Havel said to me during the festival is he said since I was worried that people wouldn't laugh at the things that they're laughing at. He said that right after the memo, and then he, said it repeatedly. And his conclusion was that New York humor or Jewish humor or whatever the audience was has a connection to Czech humor. And I sort of agree with that. There is this sense in both senses of humor of being sort of the underdog, being the in a world of like where things just go wrong all the time, and that's pretty much what you expect. And that's what I grew up with, that sort of humor. And so I do think that there is a connection, especially here in New York. Not to say that you can't have that humor elsewhere, but I think that there is, you find things that correlate, both as a translator and as a director. When I was, trying to direct, when I was directing the memo, I was just finding things that we found humorous that worked within that framework. And maybe it wasn't the exact thing that was originally there, but it sort of resonated with what was originally there. And so it's also, I think Stepan's very right that the act of translating is the first act of direction that happens. So you're finding it there, but you're finding it again as a director with the text. And I think what I saw my job as a director to be was to feel what that original humor was and find ways to bring that to the audience. Yeah.
Can I have two questions? Well, first, I'd like to thank you, all the actors for wonderful readings. It was absolutely amazing. And I have two questions. And Paul, you said that Havel's, if I understood correctly, that Havel's plays are basically tragedies. And but now we're talking for 10 minutes about his humor in those plays. So if you could talk about that a little bit, and then
ideas.
Okay.
No, well, the statement that his plays are tragedies, that was his statement. That was what he said about his plays. And I think what he meant was that there is no way out. There's no Czech word for happy ending. The Czechs have an English word, which they've imported, happy end, right? And there was something about writers living in communism where there was no place for the individual. There was no place for individual triumph. There was only place for collective triumph. And so it would be totally unrealistic for a play to end with the triumph of the hero or the individual. It just doesn't work. But the Czechs are masters at black humor, and tragedy and humor aren't mutually exclusive at all. And in fact, the Czechs have had an amazing way under communism of making the blackest of jokes in order to relieve the tedium and the agony of their ordinary lives. And so Havel's humor is of that nature and comes from that background. But the other thing about the humor is that I was a member of an unofficial group of people when I was living in Czechoslovakia called the Crusaders School of Pure Humor Without Jokes. And that's exactly what Havel's humor is. It's not jokey humor. It's a structural humor. It's humor that's drawn from the absurdity of life. And you can laugh at it, you can cry, but the two go together really well, I think.
Thank you. And if I can have another question, Edward? Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask Stepan, I know that this play, The Increased Difficulty of Concentration, is not that well known, I think, internationally.
Mhm.
And if you can maybe tell us a little bit, like, where in Havel's work, where is its place in Havel's work in his whole playwriting career, and what are its specialties, or why did you translate it?
Well, again, as I said, I think that it is of all the Havel plays, it's the most sort of openly a farce. I think that it's maybe, even though it is a political play, even though it is critiquing really the Marxist scientific point of view, it's maybe the least, really political play. It's the most theatrical of his plays, I would say. Not to say that the others are not. And I always had sort of the sense that when one talks about Havel with my theatrical colleagues, when you sort of think about Havel as a giant figure of the Eastern European theater, there's always a sense that maybe, those plays have to be very philosophical and they have to be very deep, and there has to be some sort of a sense of, heavy feeling to them. And this play really doesn't seem to be having it. It is a great, door slamming farce, even though I consider the ending of the play to be really pretty heartbreaking, just like many of Havel's plays are, because the main protagonist once again, finds himself at the beginning of the play, right? So going back to also what Paul was talking about, is humor in those plays and in the increased difficulty of concentration. It's an absurd humor, right? No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you are always finding yourself again at the beginning of the play. But I am not exactly sure what the, place in Havel's development the play takes. Maybe Edward, who has sort of studied this maybe more than I did, has an answer to that.
Well, I mean, it was the last of the plays before his work was banned.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it came at a point of almost a sort of optimism, because the Prague Spring was happening, and he was about to go heading off to New York for the Memo, and his career was actually doing pretty well. And so I feel like there's a lot of this stuff is self-critique, but the increased difficulty is more of self-critique of the overprivileged intellectual than the dissident. And it was a position that he had very briefly. And I feel like people aren't as drawn to it because the legend of Havel is about the dissident, and so people are drawn to the plays that more directly address that, that legend of Havel. And so the first two, the Office Party and the Memo, those were definitely political plays. And of course, once his work was banned, you have the Vanyek plays, you have all these other things that were in one way or another addressing the state. But this one isn't really. And it's a sort of odd one out as a result. And so when people want to do Havel, they usually are thinking, oh, I want to do something really strongly political. And then they come across this and they think, oh, it's a funny play that talks about, overprivileged intellectuals, which works very well for what it is, but it's not what people are expecting.
Yeah, I have a question for Stepan, if I could. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The title of the play in Czech is not the increased difficulty of concentration, it's the narrowing possibilities of concentration. What do you make of that discrepancy?
I really did think about it a great deal when I thought about the title. Because the Czech title is actually reversed, right? It's a
Yes.
decreased impossibility. Yeah, so it goes the other way around.
It goes the other-
But it says the same thing, and I decided to really go with the same title that Vera Blackwell, I think, gave it.
It's a good title.
Because
But the sense of in the sort of mid to late 60s of the sense of narrowing possibilities is definitely part of the social and political life of the country at the time, right? So it's things do get lost in translation.
Of course, yeah.
But it's not a big deal. I'm just curious about that.
Traduttore traditore, as they say.
Right.
Terrific. So I'm just gonna send one last question out to the actors, if anyone has any thoughts about this. Do you feel the Czech underneath the English when you perform? Do you feel like, does it feel like a normal play in English, or do you feel that sense of another language sort of peeking through as you say the words?
I feel the sense of a different culture peeking through. I don't know enough about Czech as far as a language goes, but definitely I feel like the hitchhiker thing, that feels like a strange European episode to me.
Yes.
More than like, I mean, I don't know Czech at all, so I can't really feel any Czech peeking through. But there's a heightenedness to it. There's a formality almost, even in the vernacular of, like, say, the boss, right, in the office party. That there's a sort of formal structure that makes it almost verse-like. That I feel that, and you feel the pull of that. You feel the, like, and how that gives it contains it in a way that is not sort of just like speaking everyday English, which I find that in certain English and American playwrights as well. You find that sort of a way of handling language that is artful in that way, and I find that in working with both Stefan and Edward's translations, because those are the ones I've done. Working in both of those. So I don't know if that is a nod to your talent, or if that is a nod to the fact that it's a translation. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It really was a pleasure to hear everyone's thoughts, and thank you all actors as well, and Pavla.
Thank you.
The actors were tremendous. I really appreciated your work. It was I didn't think it was possible to do it when you're so isolated from each other, but it was very, very moving and very instructive. I actually learned a lot just by watching you play. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward, and thank you.
Thank you very much, and it was so nice to see all of you. From all over the world, Paul from Canada and Stepan from Portland, and it's been an amazing experience and night, and we are continuing tomorrow. Please join us. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Pavel. Ahoy.
Good night. Ahoy.
Ahoy, Papa.
Ahoy.
Bye-bye. Thank you.